Hello everyone and welcome to Avantika Designeering Series or ADS as we like to call it. Every week on Wednesday, we feature design and technology leaders who share their professional journey, their thoughts on their domain of work, and designeering where the world of design and engineering meet. Make sure you follow us on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And with that, let's continue with your show.
I've always been a part of certain conversations where I say that our education system needs a redesign, making it sound as colossal as launching the next revolutionary operating system. We as humans have gone out on our own and evolved and changed, but our education system has remained static throughout these years. Our education system is made to seem like a process born out of rules and regulations, whereas in today's world, our education is something that has to be born out of the creative thinking process. Even with the changes that are to occur in the future, the creative thinking process is also not the only answer. However, it is now important to look at education from different sets of lenses. And that's why in this episode, we discuss education, innovation, and technology. And who better than Rajendran Dandapani, Director of Engineering, Zoho Corporation, and President, Zoho Schools of Learning. Rajendran shares his views on education, technology, building a company, and much more. He has been a TEDx speaker, a contra academician, and a technology evangelist. On our journey of discovering the aura of designeering in a different domain, we talk about edifying technology with him. Hi Rajendran, welcome to Avantika Designeering Series podcast show. It's a honor and pleasure to host you on our show today.
Thank you. Feels good.
Super. So, Rajendran, starting with our icebreaker, I believe some stories don't have a clear beginning, middle, and end. And life is about not knowing, having to change, taking a moment and making the best of it without knowing what's going to happen next. How has been your response to the new normal around you since last few weeks?
Oh, this is going on for months now. So I would actually first have to confess that there were so many life skills that I didn't know. Only when the house help is gone, only when you have to chip in and play your role as a member of the family and not just some breadwinner who goes out to office and vanishes for the day and comes back just for dinner, only then you start realizing that there is so much that you have to do that you don't know how to do. I didn't know how to make tea. I learned it. Am I ashamed? Am I happy that I learned this little life skill? Of course I am. I got my work schedules in order. I was able to connect with a lot of people around the world who work in my company in the same way that I was connecting with my teammates. You see, this digital connection overcomes the distance of geography. So I was actually looking forward to this new world where somebody who lives close to you is going to be a closer teammate, and somebody you don't see every day is slowly going to vanish into the background. We had all these tools all this time. Video conferencing has been around for 30 years now. But only now, when it has become a necessity and as the only source of contact, you realize that the number of people you can be in touch with on a day to day manner, the amount of stuff you can learn from people, it doesn't need to be limited by geography. And for a very long time, our CEO, Sridhar Vembu himself, he fashioned the company around two orthogonal ideas. He said an office should be a place to collaborate, but it should also allow for contemplation, a place where you can call your own, you can meditate deeply on a large problem and undistracted, unaffected by external influences. For the first time, probably in all my life, I was actually able to do that division between contemplation and collaboration. There was this me time, my time, and there was this team interaction time where I could go on calls, video calls, chats, and so on. And to actually answer that question where you asked me about how is this new normal, for the first time I'm realizing that there are things that we don't have answers for. And that is when humility hits you. We think we are overcoming everything and technology is an answer, and it's just a matter of time before we are in complete control of this too. And once in a while it hits you, and this is one such occasion. You are not in complete control of the situation you are in. It brings out the worst in some people, it brings out the best in some people. It actually exposes the personality of people, and that's been a great learning experience for me.
Oh, that's exciting. In fact, while you were sharing this, even I was thinking about things that I didn't know early, and and I learned it in the last couple of weeks or months, as you rightly said. In fact, Rajendran, in a career, it's not how long it is, but how good it is, and that's something that matters. You dropped out of IIT Madras, worked with so many exciting companies, and now president of Zoho Schools. Can you take us through all these years in your life and share with us how did all of these things actually happen?
Okay, so some stories are told so that you learn something from it and you emulate it. There are other kinds of stories that are told which are more like cautionary tales, like the stories that moms tell daughters which kind of guy not to look at, or the stories that dads tell their sons about who not to idolize. So my story is more the horror kind, because when I started off as a school kid, I was top notch. I was the top ranker in my school. I used to participate in all sorts of extracurricular activities, and I was the school pupil leader. I was the topper in two subjects in my class 10 and class 12 across the nation. And top of the world was the feeling I always kept getting. I used to beat all my competition hollow. And then I appeared for the JEE, the Joint Entrance Examination, and got through with a high rank, and took computer science as an option, first option, but I didn't get it because of my rank. So I opted for electronics in Madras IIT. Till then, I had not known what defeat meant, what failure meant. Not failed a single course, single class, never been second rank in any of the monthly tests or semester tests or annual tests. And I have been the envy of family members and friends, and I was being pointed at as the person to emulate and follow by all the other parents in my school. That's where my dad was, that's where my mom was, that's where I was. And then I entered IIT, and there it's easy to in retrospect say that I was distracted. I saw something else that caught my passion. But all that is just icing on the cake, just misleading sentences and wordplay. The truth is I screwed up. The word that you used, you said I dropped out of IIT Madras. That's actually a what do you call euphemism, because Bill Gates dropped out. He chose not to continue college because he had something more interesting to do with Microsoft. I was kicked out. I simply didn't have the grades and the grade point average and the number of credits that I must have had by the end of the sixth semester, that they sent a warning to my dad, a letter, direct letter to my dad in his hometown. And he opened that letter, and that was the first intimation that anything was going wrong at all. He had a stroke. From that moment till he passed away a couple of years ago, the 25, 30 years, he lived with the impact of a stroke, a clot in his brain. So it was like from the from cloud nine to rock bottom in a matter of a couple of months, and I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. Yes, the reason this was happening was I had gotten interested in computing, programming the computer. There was a beautiful Siemens powered Fortran processor in our computer center, and I started. I was enamored by it. The power of a computer, the power of writing code that could work magic on a screen. I got sucked into it. But it's easy to, again, in retrospect, say I got into computer science. Had I gotten into computer science as an engineering degree itself, I might have been different and all that, because I wouldn't know. Probably I would have become an electronics hacker and still dropped out. So I'm not here offering any excuses. I respect the teachers who showed me tough love. I look back and think that IIT retained its so called hallowed reputation by kicking me out. It's good that they did it. It's good that they showed me tough love and told me that I have to pull up my socks. And that I did. I met the love of my life at IIT. I wouldn't have met her had I not dropped out. That's an interesting twist in the story. I met my love, and I learned a lot from her. I learned a lot about grounding myself with reality all the time, walking the middle path, taking none of the extremes, and slowly, very slowly, I clawed my way back in. I learned about how to interact with people. I learned that's probably the most important skill. Working with people was the most important skill. I learned a lot in programming. I actually was employee number 7 at Zoho Corporation, and my resume didn't carry a degree certificate or wasn't some credentials that I have acquired at college. It was a website that I had designed for the company. Out of my own interest, I designed a website, I designed a logo, I approached the CEO, and he was kind enough to give me an audience at that time. And he saw something in me, probably something that I myself didn't see in me at that time. And I'm eternally thankful for that beautiful break that he gave me. And then, since then, I have been a technologist all my life, working with a very large tech team and a design team. And when the iPhone was launched, I was naturally I gravitated towards the mobile device, and I now manage a very large mobile team in Zoho Corporation. And around 2004, 2005, Zoho Schools was born. It's basically a meaningful alternative to conventional college education, because we saw that more and more colleges were churning out graduates who were degree holders, who were not real engineers, who weren't able to hit the ground running and deliver good quality software, because what they were taught at college and what is actually expected in a company, in a high tech organization like ours, is quite different. And instead of just lamenting about this academy industry gap, we thought we can be the change that we are clamoring for. So we just got some senior employees who wanted to give something back to the society. We got them together. We went to a nearby school, recruited some students. They started a beautiful journey. And 18 months later, kids who hadn't touched a computer before, 18 months later, they were able to actually be productive members of our organization. So that brainchild, I was actually I am happy that I was part of this Zoho Schools initiative by Zoho. It's 15 years old now. In fact, an interesting twist here is my own son, who is now 21 years old, joined Zoho Schools. After finishing a homeschooling adventure with me, he joined Zoho Schools, and he is now a colleague working directly under the CEO. So, if you actually look at it, it's almost like the classic hero's journey. There is a call to adventure, there is a mentor I meet, there are trials, there are mistakes I make, so many mistakes that I make. There is growth, there are new skills that I learn. There is almost a death and a rebirth, a moment where something stopped and something else started. There was a revelation. I finally changed, and I am continuing to atone for the mistakes I made, and I am now a new person. So it's the humble, classic, quintessential hero's journey, is how I would put it.
While you in a very humble way address it as a hero's journey, I think for a lot of people like me, for a lot of young aspiring engineers or students who are going through their education, they would call it a superhero and not an hero for sure. So one of the things that I also pick up, Rajendran, from your journey, your profile says that you are a contra academician at heart. What does it mean? And can you also share about homeschooling your son that you just spoke about? I think it's a very brave call. I'm a father to 8 year old, and this was a question that had hit me as well while deciding whether my son should go to the school or not, having understood that a lot of conventional education is killing the creative juices in a child. How did all of this happen? So what's contra academician, and could you take us through your journey of homeschooling?
So, upfront, I need to tell you that it is easy to look at somebody's life and follow the arc and fall for the myth that it is all scripted and well planned. That's never the story. Things happen, and then things happen as a secondary effect, and then there are unexpected, uncontrollable events that happen, and there is this reaction, and eventually when you look back, things seem to fall in place. So that is just one case. My case is where these things fell in place. So with that disclaimer, let me just get started with what I mean by contra academician. So an academician, of course, I am an academician because I have been interested in teaching. All through my life, I have been teaching my colleagues. I have been training at a weekend organization. I've been giving guest lectures. And when my son was reaching an age where I could supplement the teaching that was happening at school, I became a teacher at home also. And that was when I started realizing that there is this rat race. It used to be there even when I was at school, and now I was seeing it has only worsened. There is this unstoppable urge to memorize everything. There is this automatic cycle of slowly picking things up and increasing the heat until the moment of the exam. And during the exam, vomit whatever you have memorized and automatically forget, exponentially forget all that you learned, whatever skills you gained, whatever things you memorized, very few days or weeks after the exam. It's become almost comical, almost laughable, though it's an irony that people laugh at it rather than regret that it is happening. The other thing I started observing was things were getting unnecessarily compartmentalized. The history teacher wasn't sharing information with the chemistry teacher. In fact, chemistry and physics had so much in common conceptually, but at class, they were being taught by two different people who never even met eyes. That was the feeling I started getting. I researched the books, I researched how they were being taught. In fact, I put him in a Zara Hatake school only. And even there, I was able to get that bad smell of compartmentalization and rat race and memorization. And worst of all, when I wanted to teach him stuff, I wanted to tell him, hey, there are uh, these computers and you need to know how to work magic with them. It's going to be crucially important that you are a power user and you are able to work as a developer of software. And even irrespective of whatever domain you get into, learning how to program a computer, learning how to massage data and derive meaningful insights out of it are going to be important in this modern era. And when that started happening, and when I started realizing he didn't have the time for it because of all his exam routines and memorization jokes, I realized it was time to pull him out of school. I had a heart to heart talk with him and my wife, who was a pillar of support, even though she has lived through watching me drop out of IIT and trying to help me out of it. And even though we don't have a graduate at a male graduate, she is a double graduate, she is an MS. And after an MSc, she did an MS at IIT, and that's where I met her. But I am not a graduate, and my son isn't a graduate, and I have to appreciate her for going out on a limb and saying, "Yes, I am with you on this journey. Go ahead, let's do this experiment." It was an experiment. Even today, the experiment hasn't ended. It's 22 years now, and I have been homeschooling him for 7 years. The past 6, 7 years, I've been working with him. And actually, it's not the National Institute for Open Schooling or some open curriculum that I followed. I didn't write the exams either. The boy didn't write the public exams or get any degrees, certificates, and so on. It was unschooling of the true raw kind. The closest I can recommend, if you're interested in Googling about it, is this blog by Leo Babauta. Leo Babauta has written a blog. He is the owner of the Zen Habits blog. And in that, he talks about unschoolery. And that's probably one of those epochal moments where my mind turned. I said, if this guy could do it and he could pull it off with 5 of his kids, I think I can do it with one. And the company was helpful. It allowed me to approach homeschooling in a flexible manner where I could go to work early. My wife also works in the same company, and I could go to work early and she could come in late, and I could leave early. I could have an afternoon break where I could spend a couple of hours with my son. I worked very close to where I lived, and that also helped because I was able to expose my son, who was missing out on the conventional social interaction with students of his own age. I was able to get him to my office and mingle with the children there and the employees' children. And Zoho schools was also a beautiful benefit for him because he was able to come and socialize with students there. So, looking back, it's a beautiful experiment I conducted, and it's still ongoing. And I think he is now a well rounded individual and a person with many more options at hand. That is what I think all education should aim for. Education is unfortunately more of a narrowing kind. Oh, when you are in class 8, you could have become anybody. When you're in class 12, you've already decided biology is in or out. And when you are in your degree course, you are already deciding whether mechanical engineering is out, whether pursuit in humanities is out, and so on. And eventually, you become a narrower and narrower expert. I think, on the contrary, which is why I chose contra academician. I think, on the contrary, education is about opening the mind and moving to better places of vantage. So you are at a position where there are two things you could do. When you gain education of the true kind, you now have four things you could do. And then you gain something more, you have 10 things that you could do. And that is the pursuit of your passion. You find out what your calling is, what your purpose in life is, and that's when you hit flow. Education, the all the aim that education should aim for is somehow connecting a student to his true abiding passion, help him or her find their purpose in life, and encourage them to enjoy moments of flow. So that is how I am redefining all education, and I'm encouraging people to take it up. A small note of warning before I finish, though. Um, if you are trying to homeschool a child, forget about hobbies, Forget about weekends and vacations where you have your own plans while your child is at home or at school. Your child becomes a young adult and you have to plan for him or her too. But in my case, teaching was my hobby. Reading books aloud with him and solving problems in mathematics and programming with him was a hobby for me. I was there available all the time and I enjoyed every moment of it. So, if you can live up to that expectation that the child is going to have for you, I think um, you don't need a school anymore. In fact, one of the offshoots of this pandemic, people are really considering and taking a hard, long look at why an academic institution should be entrusted with a child, particularly at the level of higher education. Is it really worth it? Is that academic credential that I get after 4 years in that college really worth it? When at the palm of my hand, in my bedroom, I can actually consume everything I want on the internet. That question has started coming up. And for every bad thing, there is one little silver lining. One silver lining of this pandemic is that people are reconsidering and reevaluating the true merits of education. And I'm happy about it.
Hey, did you know Zoho is experimenting with 10 villages in Tamil Nadu, where 20 engineers in each village will collaborate and build software for the world. The plan is to make engineers work in places closer to their hometowns. In fact, the way we develop, test, and deploy software has been advancing in leaps and bounds over the last 10 years or so. So the way we deliver a code in modern day software development is more or less the same across most places. What is your development process? So from your journey, from your personal journey from schooling, now we are moving into your personal work system.
So, much of what I do is actually based on how Zoho as a company operates. So, we have been developers of software for the past 23 years. And I remember how this started. Our CEO was in the US and he was working for Qualcomm. And his brother was visiting him, and they both had gone to a mall for purchasing some dresses for the next week. And while buying a t-shirt at a dress shop in a mall, he saw the label in the back which talked about made in China, and then there was made in Thailand, and then there was made in Vietnam, and there was made in Mexico, and there was even a made in Pakistan, and there was not a single t-shirt made in India. It kind of rankled him, and he was a electronic software engineer at that time in Qualcomm. And when you have a hammer in your hand, they say proverbially that all problems look like nails. And that's what Sridhar Vembu and Kumar Vembu, the two brothers who founded AdventNet, which later became Zoho Corporation, they felt we should do something that we can be proud. We can call it made in India and we can make it for the world. That's how it started. So, from that fateful evening 23 years ago till today, we have been very careful about deciding what to leave at the table, what we will not pick, even though it is lucrative. So, we said we will not do turnkey projects for companies. We could have easily done that the body shopping way or the turnkey projects way. We could have done that. India's IT boom actually rode that way. So we decided that we want to put our name, we want to create IP out of India, make in India long before make in India became a metal lion that we see today with the government pushing it hard. So when that happened, thankfully, Two beautiful waves also happened in the around the world. The first one was the internet was really becoming more than just an academic. First, it was a military establishment. Then it became an academic internet for colleges and universities, and finally, it was actually making that leap from academic to real commercial internet. The secure internet was being just born. E-commerce was taking off, and that was an important wave we rode, because internet as a medium for delivering software, SaaS as we now call it, has its seeds sowed then. The second wave that actually happened was the prevalence of Linux as an operating system and Java as a programming language that you could use to build software that will run on any operating system. So we were able to actually frog jump over the huge investments typically needed if you're going to go the licensed software way. Instead of licensing software for databases from an Oracle, and licensing software for software development or operating systems from Microsoft and MS Office and so on, we were able to actually use a shoestring budget and actually rocket ourselves into developing software for consumption around the world. And software as a service was born. Continuous development and deployment started happening, because when you have software up there in the cloud, overnight I can launch my next version of the software. Windows 95, we got Windows 98 3 years later. That's not the case with software that we build today. It's a trickle, a constant trickle, things that keep continuously changing. In fact, we are even able to do A B testing with software. We deploy software for different domains and different locations and different sects of people based on what their particular demographic or particular usage policies are. The beautiful thing that actually gave us an unassailable lead in building software is, unlike a company like Facebook, where you can't be seen using Facebook all the time and you can't claim I am a Facebook employee, you have to do real work. Here at Zoho, we build software to empower organizations to run their business. So, from creating documents to making presentations to managing projects to working with customer relations and um, all email and video conferencing, every one of these activities, we have a software for it from Zoho. And we started eating our own dog food. Months before any Zoho product hits the outside world, we would have actually tested it and tested it and tested it and bashed it around and criticized it internally 1,000 times. So that was something that we could do. Not all companies can claim to be able to do that. Because the CEO was in the US, and until very recently, he was in the US all the time, and the company was in India, we were able to bring that beautiful marriage between laid back, heritage focused, an Indian mentality, a hard-working ethic from India, 9,000 employees from India, to a Silicon Valley entrepreneurial DNA of a person who is in the ground, who is interacting with people day in and day out, who is able to feel the pulse of what's coming next, and a future outlook of how things would be. So, this merger between a person in the US with an ear to the ground and with a large team working 12 hours with a time zone shift working in India, we were able to pull off that beautiful merger between these two. And that really worked for us well. And today, when you look at how we build our products, we keep these three words up front. In fact, some of us have even printed out some beautiful slides and stuck it to our cubicles. Okay, cubicles used to be there, now we are at home. So we call it ICE. So what I mean by ICE is, whenever anybody does any software in our company, any module, any line of code, anything that at all, we keep these three words in mind. Integration. How well is the software that we are building going to play with the rest of the Zoho ecosystem? There are 49 different products in Zoho. If you're launching the 50th product, it has to talk the same language, it has to share the same credentials, it has to access similar data, it has to provide a unified front to the customer. That's been an important uh, aspect to keep in mind. The second is customization, ICE. The customization aspect is we have come to realize that people don't want the same thing. Every customer, every company, every employee in every company wants something different. In fact, they have stopped believing that they can get what they want. So they now have started asking for the power to modify our software the way they want it. So that last bit of customization, it's like you're sitting in a chair and you have to adjust the angle and adjust the height and adjust the backrest to your exact setting. In fact, if somebody has moved the chair around and swapped it with somebody else's chair, the moment you sit on it, you will notice three things that are different and complain about it. So this customization, so anything that we build, we keep customization as an important point in mind. Can a person customize it to suit their need? And finally, the third, which is extension. We don't want to be the software last stop. Everything you need, you won't need anything more than this. We have stopped selling that as snake oil. We have decided that we will build a platform for you. We will build as much that 90% of the time, 90% of the people want. The remaining 10%, that last mile, we will empower you to build on top of it. We are providing you a platform that you can't just customize, you can actually extend on top. So integration, customization, and extension, these three words keep running around in our minds when we build software. Is it integrable? Is it customizable? Can people extend it?
Wow, super. I think I love the clarity in which you spoke about the entire development process. In fact, Rajendran, there's so much to talk about Zoho. One of the most spoken thing about it is its culture. The views on bootstrapping, building a profitable, sustainable company, making in India. Can you tell us about the DNA of Zoho? Since you've been a part of it right since the start, and you've seen the company grow over a period of time. Can you highlight us on the DNA part of Zoho?
So before I get into that, you said I have seen the company grow. Interestingly, I have seen the company grow, but it's like Lord Krishna. Krishna, most of the pictures that you see is of a mischievous young child who seems to be growing all the time but continues to retain that mischievousness. That's what I see when I look at Zoho. Because, in spite of the fact that we have grown to so many locations around the world, we have grown to so many offices around the country, we have grown from one product to 50 products, there are a few things that haven't changed. When all around you things are changing, there are a few things that haven't changed, and that's what sets us apart. So I would like to just quickly reel off a few that come to mind. The first abiding aspect of Zoho is the freedom it provides its employees. At every level of the hierarchy, there are only 4 or 5 levels anyway, but at every level, there is a freedom, a sense of agency. You take the call, you decide, you get the credit or the blame, but you just pat your shoulder or kick your butt and move on. The ability to take those calls, the ability to rather ask for forgiveness than wait for permission, that's an aspect that I have seen from day one, way back in April 1998 to today. in August 2020, I see that has not changed much. I have read stories of so many companies, how they were a startup and how they have now become a behemoth, and how they are regretting what they lost. I'm so happy that wasn't lost here. The second aspect, as or DNA, if you want to call it, is the the so-called technology stack. And we are so happy and proud that we are in complete control of the technology stack. We didn't acquire any company. We don't run our software on a Azure or an AWS. We run it on our own data centers. Our own operating system, business operating system, runs on our own SaaS framework, and every product is natively deeply integrated into it. And what monitors the data centers? Software that we wrote monitors the applications running on the data centers, because we have a wing called Manage Engine. Most of the people who hear about Zoho do not hear about Manage Engine, because Manage Engine is Zoho for IT departments, a single one-stop shop for all the needs for managing your IT assets and monitoring uptime. So we have software that takes care of that. We have never been enamored by large, beautiful glass and steel buildings in high-tech environments in the middle of Silicon Valley, or in Bangalore, the Silicon Valley of India. We don't have an office in Bangalore. We don't intend to have it, because like our CEO says, we are not interested in fattening the purse of the landlord. We don't want to pay exorbitant rent. We would rather live in a outskirts of a location, have good internet connection, have reasonable rents to pay, and transfer all the benefits that we get because of that in the terms of good food at the cafeteria, good play areas for the employees, or even meaningful discounts to our customers. So we would rather see that happen. Never have we actually sold customer data or shared it with third parties. Once upon a time, when every company around us was actually saving data and using it, there used to be this thing about, if a product is free, beware, you are the product, right? How Facebook and other companies were selling the data and misusing it. Once upon a time, it was a necessary evil. Then it became an irritation. And now, today, people are being sued for misuse of such data. And we, during these three transformations, we were actually thanking ourselves for the decision we took decades ago, that we will not touch customer data. In fact, one of the refrains of some of our product managers inside our company is how strictly we do not share customer data even between products. So if there is a CRM solution and a campaign management tool would love to have the customer data, so that from within Zoho, another product can actually be cross sold, we are actually preventing even that from happening unless the user authorizes it by opting in. Because we say data will be in silos until permission is given by the user. Even if the user is really going to be benefiting from it, we think twice about it. We are fiercely private. We never took external money. Other people's money is opium, my boss calls it. And we were approached by a couple of companies for acquisition deals, and we never really entertained those. We are here to make an impact. We want to be made in India, made for the world. And deep down, the reason that we all get ourselves to office on a Monday morning is we know that every little bit that we do, we are going to make hundreds of startups make their products better, because we are taking the organizational, logistical, administrative headache. A startup in its most fundamental form is out there to make a dent in the universe. That's how Steve Jobs put it: make a dent in the universe. If you want to make a dent in the universe, you should not be worrying about whether you have filed taxes, or whether a particular project is late or not, or whether a particular document is in the right format. We try to take all that headache off you. That's the call to action. That's the elevator pitch of what Zoho is. And we are very happy to be fiercely private, and we are protecting customer data, and we will have vertical self dependence. We are dependent, self reliant on our own tools. If we want to build a new product, we are able to do that fast. Individual agency, as I called it. And finally, if you want to talk about DNA, one thing that strikes me just when you mentioned the word DNA is how each team in the organization is different. It's not a real self similar large monolith. In fact, monoliths are probably the most susceptible to external attacks, because you find one weakness and you can get in and destroy the whole structure like a virus infecting you. In our company, each team is different, even though they all like India with all its various languages that they speak and the cultures that they live by. Here, each team is different. Each team focuses on its strengths. We all have weaknesses, but if you can work with other teams where their strengths can actually kind of soften up your weaknesses and make 2 plus 2 5, that's a great answer that we can look for. We cannot be best at everything. We realize that. So can you be best at one thing and use the services of other teams within the company to feed off them, help them feed off you? That kind of orchestration is something that is actually emergent. It is not something that was dictated by the CEO and made us all do that, but he created the environment for it, and automatically there was this emergent behavior that things fell in place, and what you see is Zoho.
Wow, super. In fact, while you were expressing that how Zoho is helping startups with a lot of their tasks, on the other hand, in the world of SaaS based companies, there's a slang about Zoho Mafia. I believe it's inspiring team members to pursue their passion, and Zoho hasn't only created many jobs directly, but by the virtue of inspiring so many entrepreneurs, has indirectly created more jobs. How do you inspire people at Zoho to start up their own ventures?
Okay, so this word Zoho Mafia is, I think, reminiscent of PayPal Mafia, because it's basically a group of former PayPal employees. They just quit the company and created other companies like LinkedIn and YouTube and Yammer and so on. And probably that's the reference here. So the way we look at it is, I think it stems from the freedom. At its core, we have been encouraging freedom. In fact, if you are a senior person in Zoho, you wouldn't only know design, you would know some technology, you would know how to run campaigns, you would know sales, you would know some back end scaling concepts, you would know how to work with customer data. You're a merchant. You're not a particular vertical role player. You actually become a merchant. The way they call the small shops, the banias they call it, where the same person sells, the same person procures, the same person puts up a beautiful offer, the same person does customer relationships. That's what we are. We are able to empower agency in our senior managers, and along the way, sometimes what happens is, it's not about just the money, because beyond a particular point, what motivates a particular person is whether the person is given enough autonomy, whether there is a sense of purpose, whether there is I would actually put it as whether they are able to align themselves with the morals and ethics and the long term dreams that the company has. So Sridhar, for example, has gone public the past couple of weeks. You must have seen him talk about it. He has gone public about how Atmanirbhar Bharat is an important clarion call by the Prime Minister, and we need to do something here, sitting here in India. Rural upliftment. SaaS is not about living in ivory towers in some skyscrapers in some large cities like San Francisco. You can actually go back and uplift the rural situation, because there is so much talent out there. With Zoho schools, that's another great outreach that he has done, where we give 12th standard students, class 12 students, particularly people who haven't had an amazing stellar academic career, who can't afford engineering or medical or any of those automatic choices. We give them a chance to shine. We give them literally a shortcut. In 18 months we make them a software engineer. We have been doing that for 15 years. So these are all things that go beyond money. So if you are in a company like ours, if you actually learn all these skills, and along the way there is misalignment with some of these larger goals and the larger philosophies, you strike off on your own. And we are happy to see so many little companies that have come up in Chennai. Chennai is supposed to be the SaaS capital of India today. There is a beautiful ecosystem that has come out, each company supporting the other. Some have even become investors and VCs in those companies. We are happy to see a thousand flowers bloom. The most important reason why this continues to happen is we encourage entrepreneurship. We know that we are running the risk of another person wanting to strike off on their own, but for every single company that is spun out like that, and we see a Zoho mafia person coming out, there are probably 10 such beautiful teams inside the organization which have benefited from this exposure, the vertical exposure and the horizontal exposure, and the freedom that we have given them. So this will continue to happen. I am sure even Amazon is happy, because there are thousands of merchants who are now benefiting because they are from Amazon. Like the App Store became a great value add to what Apple itself was able to create, because the iPhone was an amazing device already. But when the App Store came and third parties could actually create apps and run it on the iPhone, both of them benefited. Third parties benefited, the Apple company benefited, and the end user, the customer, the king of it all, benefited. So that is how I see it. I am happy that there is this Zoho mafia, though it is a misnomer, and no one company can do it all. So, welcome to the club, is how I see it. This will continue to happen.
Do you know Zoho has a social mission? Yes, the company grows food on its farm and serves its employees in Chennai. They also train young graduates from smaller towns to make them employable. Oh, interesting. So, Rajendran, moving from your journey to Zoho to the world of technology. So, while developing products, how do you make the connection between the world of design and the research and development at Zoho?
So, we don't actually try to distinguish design and technology, and there is this intermediate called user experience. I actually like the way you call yourself designeering. There is one single abiding concept, which is the customer needs to be given the smoothest possible pathway forward, with very little confusion and distraction, should be warned about automatic pitfalls, and should not be cheated, and once in a while should be delighted. So these are the very few beautiful things that we should hold. And just like there is an army there will be the horse riders, there will be these archers, there will be these cannon manning people, and there will be these elephant riders. Each of them approaches the war using the tool that they have, but each of their goals is the same: to win over the competition, to win, to defeat the enemy, and so on. That is how we look at our own approach to design and technology and R&D. So everything that we do, there are internal reviews, there are internal stand up meetings where, right from prototyping and the so called whiteboard, where we have post it notes and we follow the agile approach of actually coming up with the flow, the workflow that's needed, all the way down to an internal beta, an external beta, and finally launching the product and observing feedback. That build learn loop continues in our company too. So that's the melding. I remember so many people in my team who actually started off as engineers, who got so interested in design, in actually researching information architecture, that they actually applied for a team change, a role change, and moved. And those people are valued more in the design team that they have gotten into, because they come with additional understanding of the world of technology. I I am a staunch believer. I think Steve Jobs said it. He said, technology married with arts, married with liberal arts, married with the humanities, that yields us the result. He said, that makes our hearts sing. So I hold that very dear. So every technologist should know enough of design to actually decide whether something that he is proposing will actually appeal to a user or not. And similarly, every designer should also know whether something that they are proposing is feasible technology wise or not. If these two operate in silos, I don't think you actually have a vibrant work culture in your environment. In fact, I think Steve Jobs said something else during the launch of the Macintosh. He said about how all the people working in his team were poets and artists and musicians and historians and zoologists, not developers, not programmers. He said they are musicians, poets, artists, zoologists, historians. They also happen to be the best computer scientists in the world. It's incidental, he said. If it hadn't been computer science, these people would have been doing amazing things in other fields. So that is how we approach team composition and the beautiful merger between design and technology.
Yeah. So while we are talking about this merger, one of the questions that I have is how engineers and designers can cope up with the sheer speed of innovation in technology to keep themselves up to date with the happenings around.
So, um, to each his or her own technique, but I would actually try to give whatever I observe in my company, what I try to profess within my own team. One of the first things is simplicity will always be in fashion, be it technology, be it design, be it user experience. Simplicity, in fact, in this more and more confusing VUCA, they call it VUCA world, simplicity is a rarity. So anything that's a rarity will be in demand. And I think when you have two options, if you choose the simpler option, you're actually doing the right thing. So simplicity, whenever you can, wherever you can. There is a beautiful book. I think the name of the book is The Laws of Simplicity. I'll try to get the author's name. So, the laws of simplicity, they talk about how to actually say a thousand no's, how to focus on what's the core deliverable that you're trying to do. It's very, very easy to, particularly programmers do that often. They say, oh no, that's also possible. Let me add this feature also. And that is when the overall experience manager has to take the call. How many things that you could have done that you choose not to do actually differentiates the good and the truly great. So aim for simplicity. Again and again, that is something that I have learned. Sometimes I have learned it the hard way in my life. The second thing I would like to stress about keeping in touch is have some slack time. Very often in our quest to try to pack our day with a lot of meaningful activities, we somehow take away the joy of randomness, the joy of undecided adventure. So, always in your day, in your week, every one of us should set apart some percentage of our time. The famous Google 20% came out of that. Can we have some percentage of our time allotted for nothing, where we can do anything we want and probably something meaningful will come out of it? Probably nothing will come out of it except the experience of going through it. I don't know, I don't care. But you need to have undocumented, unallotted time every day. And that is going to shape how you're going to actually spend time in the future, what skills you learn, how you're going to iterate on it, and so on. In fact, there was this guy, he's actually a design agency CEO. His name is Stephen Sagmeister. And even Daniel Pink talks about him in the book named Drive. And Stephen Sagmeister, he said that one fine morning I realized I wasn't creative anymore. I used to be amazingly creative. I won a lot of awards, but I was getting mediocre. And when I look back, I have been doing well. My calendar was packed. All the customers were coming back to me. They were all happy. Nobody was complaining. But deep inside me, there was this angst. There was this unfulfilled void that was coming up. And that is when he chose to take a year off. And he has been doing that instead of working hard for the next 40 years and then retiring and then living jobless for the next 15, 20 years and then dying. This man said, I will borrow time from my post retirement zone and pepper them across my working time. So every 7 years, this man takes a year break. If you visit his website somewhere during this break year, it will say, thank you for visiting Sagmeister Incorporated. We are on a 1 year experiment to learn new things so that we can serve you better. I don't know if each of you can really afford to become a Sagmeister or whether your boss will allow it, but internalize the concept of having null time that you can spend meaningfully, consistently throughout your life. And that combined with your quest for simplicity, whether you are a technologist or a designer, if you are questing for simplicity and always apportioning time for the unknown every day of your life, I think you have it going well for you.
Wow, that's such a noble way of thinking and living your life. Very, very, very interesting. So, Rajendran, coming to my last question on our show, at Avantika University, we are taking the blended and liberal education approach, bridging the gap between what industry requires and what we are teaching them. What's your view on the concept of designeering itself, which is the amalgamation of design and engineering? And do you think it is the need of the hour?
So, even at Zoho schools where I teach, I head Zoho schools, one of the things that I actively encourage all my faculty colleagues to do is, as often as possible, jump over the wall. In fact, prove that there is no wall. So there is a faculty member who is teaching Java programming, and along the way, while talking about Java, there is an order of complexity, and suddenly it becomes mathematical. And when you're talking mathematical and exponential curves and logarithmic curves, and suddenly it becomes artistic, because when you graph a mathematical curve, there is art involved. There are so many artistic beauties that have come out simply because they were pursued mathematically and rigorously. And finally, we learn an interesting word. And when we want to stress a little bit on the word, we go to the etymology of the word, the story behind the word. At the end of an hour class, we don't know whether it is a Java class or an etymology class in English or a design class or a mathematics class. That's what I have been encouraging my faculty members to do. Because the moment education is over, the so called in quotes education is over, and you get into the cauldron, the boiling cauldron of real life, you are not going to say that I am now doing mathematics, don't ask me chemistry, or I am now doing physics, don't bother me with history. The world is not going to wait for people like that. So you need to be able to swap hats. You need to be able to transcend these silly uh, uh, divisions that teachers and professors, for their own convenience, have introduced. We should be able to straddle those. That is true learning. So I am really impressed by the approach that you have been taking. I would like to know a little more about what you're doing. And I am actually envious of the kind of students that you have, because when you talk about design and engineering, when you call it designeering, I think it's the need of the hour, because cross departmental or transcending domains is probably going to give us the solutions that we are looking for. When you look at this vaccine hunt, for example, I'm sure there is a data scientist out there who is crunching all the data, who is probably genome sequencing the virus, who is running a million protein simulations to find out what the answer is. How can a biologist say, I am a biologist, I am a pathologist, I can't do programming? At least he should be able to, she should be able to work with a programmer. So if you know enough, that's where the T of skill set development comes in. Become a generalist. You need to be a generalist across a beautiful spectrum of domains, but also become a specialist. The T, the vertical bar of the T, where people come to you. Know enough to go to the right person, which is the horizontal bar, and know enough so that the right people come to you asking for expertise, which is the vertical part of the bar. And if you can manage that well, I think that's going to be amazing. We need people like you.
Oh, thank you so much for validating our thought. Thank you, Rajendran, for joining us on Avantika Designeering series. It was a pleasure listening to you, and how I wish we could go on and on in terms of our conversation. I'm sure that our listeners will have a lot of learning from this conversation. And yeah, if they have any questions, I'm sure they can reach out to you via social media, and take your inputs on their queries, if any. Thank you so much for joining us on this.
Thanks a lot. All the best.
Hey there, we hope you enjoyed our show. Do write to us on ads@avantika.edu.in. We look forward to your opinions, feedbacks, and suggestions of speakers you would like us to host on this show. Do tune in our channel next week on Wednesday for a new story on Hubhopper or wherever you get your podcast from. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter.